Born on March 31st, 1985, WrestleMania has changed professional wrestling in ways beyond even Vince McMahon's wildest dreams. McMahon wanted to take over the world, and Mania was his first major attempt at dragging wrestling from its geeky little niche and into mainstream consciousness. He took a huge gamble by pouring vast amounts of money into the event, but it paid off. WWE's popularity exploded in the aftermath, and WrestleMania has become an annual highlight. It remains the backbone of WWE's storytelling today, and as the grandest stage of them all, it's only natural that some of WWE's most iconic moments have taken place at WrestleMania. From Hulk Hogan slamming Andre the Giant to Steve Austin's catastrophic heel turn, Mania's biggest moments have shaped wrestling as we know it, and WWE would look vastly different today without them. Vince McMahon could not have conquered wrestling without WrestleMania, and WWE's biggest show is nothing without its biggest moments. But a few tweaks here and there, however, and things suddenly look entirely different not only for WrestleMania, but for the sport as a whole. I'm Andy for WhatCulture Wrestling, and these are the 10 biggest what-if scenarios in WrestleMania history. Number 10. What if Bray Wyatt defeated John Cena? Daniel Bryan's WWE Championship win shouldn't have been the only star-making performance at WrestleMania 30. At this point, Bray Wyatt was well on his way to becoming something truly special, and the stage was set for an epic victory. Still one of the hottest things in the company at that time, Wyatt was set to take off, but just like his opponent had done several times before, John Cena clipped his wings. Wyatt's push was immediately sabotaged as Cena effectively demolished the entire Wyatt family all by himself. Bray began a long slide towards irrelevance, and while the feud continued throughout the summer, Big Match John ultimately prevailed. The match outcome represents a real missed opportunity, and while Wyatt would eventually become WWE Champion almost 3 years later, he was already damaged goods well before that point. Number 9. What if Asuka had stayed undefeated? WrestleMania 34 delivered a couple of shocking results, and while Brock Lesnar going over Roman Reigns after almost a year of build was the most notable, Charlotte Flair's victory over Asuka was the most damaging. Asuka's years-long undefeated streak was on the line as she challenged the SmackDown Women's Champion on the grandest stage of them all. It was an epic match and definitely one befitting of the stage and the storyline, but the result was one nobody saw coming. Asuka tapped out and the streak was over. A ruthless, damaging summer would follow, as Asuka was fed to Carmella and James Ellsworth before finally maybe recovering and capturing the belt at TLC. But like Bray Wyatt, it was a case of too little, too late. And while Asuka's situation isn't as dire as Bray's, she's nowhere near as special as she was before WrestleMania 34. Had the Empress of Tomorrow not been fed to Flair, her aura may not be so diminished, and we might be talking about her as a potential WrestleMania 35 main eventer, as well as Ronda Rousey, Charlotte, and Becky Lynch. Instead, Asuka will probably wrestle Lacey Evans or something equally daft. Number 8. What if Mr. T no-showed? Getting boatloads of celebrities into WrestleMania to broaden wrestling's appeal was a key part of Vince McMahon's original strategy, and Mr. T was a huge part of this equation. WrestleMania 1 was built around his main event tag with Hulk Hogan against Paul Orndorff and Roddy Piper. It formed much of the show's appeal, but it almost didn't happen. The A-Team star was reportedly concerned about the damage that wrestling might do to his supposed tough guy image. He got cold feet just before the event, and in the words of Hulk Hogan, that ever-reliable source, he started getting really sketchy. He was really getting kind of nervous. End quote. Hulk was eventually able to talk him around, but at worst, the no-show could have buried the whole event, and at best, it would have dealt WWE a major PR blow, frustrated the fans, and made Vince McMahon think twice about ever booking celebrities to wrestle again. Number 7. What if The Rock was forced out of WrestleMania 15? This event pitted two of the Attitude Era's biggest icons, The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin, against each other in what became one of the biggest main events in the show's history, with Austin taking the WWE Championship from his big rival. And guess what? It almost didn't happen. According to The Rock himself, there was a lot of pressure on the Great One heading into the event. He claimed on a Facebook stream that almost none of his peers thought that he was was ready for such a huge spot. They were actively trying to squash the match, claiming he was just a young kid, a rookie, and he had no business in the WrestleMania headlining spot, leading to untold levels of friction between The Rock and his fellow roster members. But unfortunately for the Rebels, Vince McMahon and Steve Austin did want the match, so it went ahead as planned. This was ultimately the right decision, as the bout was an important point in both Rock and Austin's WWE legacies. And besides, look at the rest of the card. What else could have possibly closed the show? Butterbean versus Bart Gunn? The Undertaker hanging the big boss man? For the love of God. Number 6. What if Shawn Michaels refused to lose to Stone Cold? He was on top of the wrestling world in March 1998, but Steve Austin had yet to become WWE champion. Fortunately, WWE booked him to go over at WrestleMania 14, having executed the perfect face turn 1 year prior, and Shawn Michaels was the opponent. But as we all know, HBK is one of the most notorious backstage politicians in wrestling history. He ended up losing to Stone Cold in the end, but if the stories are to be believed, Michaels almost kiboshed the whole thing. According to rumour and innuendo, Michaels had a big problem with the idea of dropping the belt to Stone Cold. So he dug his heels in, and it took some serious convincing from locker room leader The Undertaker before he came around. You can only imagine how that conversation went. It turned out to be one of Austin's defining moments. Had Michaels not been talked around, it would have left Vince McMahon with a major quandary. It would have angered Austin and quashed his rise, and with Michaels losing his smile and retiring for 4 years in the aftermath, his victory would have been utterly pointless. Not that that would have stopped him, though. Number 5. What if Hulk Hogan didn't steal YOKOZUNA'S spotlight? WrestleMania 9 was a horrendous show wrapped up in a goofy fancy dress toga, with almost every match a certified stinker, particularly The Undertaker vs Giant Gonzalez, but let's not talk about that. The main event saw Bret Hart defending his WWE Championship against Yokozuna, and Yoko won. That scamp Mr. Fuji threw salt in Hart's eyes, aiding his client to victory in less than 10 minutes, but Hulk Hogan, the character, couldn't bear to see this happen. Barely giving Yoko a moment to celebrate, Hogan did a Hogan and stole the spotlight by challenging him to an immediate title fight and taking the belt in 23 seconds. At a time when Hogan's popularity was evaporating by the second, this was a disaster. It put the belt back on Hogan at a time when WWE should really have been looking to transition away from him, and it prevented the company from progressing with a fresher, younger champion. Hogan ultimately dropped the belt back to Yokozuna 3 months later, but WrestleMania 9 was a dreadful show during one of WWE's biggest historic down periods. Avoiding this stunt would have at least helped WWE save face and prevent Yoko from taking a huge momentum hit at the height of his monster push. Number 4. What if The Undertaker's streak had ended earlier? Brock Lesnar beating The Undertaker at WrestleMania 30 is one of the most shocking outcomes in Mania history. Many disagreed with it at the time, but Taker's legendary streak ending at 21-0 gave Brock a launchpad for the rest of his career, including a career best run from 2014 through to 2015. And while the match did kind of stink, it's impossible to argue that Lesnar didn't benefit. But WWE had actually considered ending the streak several times prior to that. Kurt Angle was originally pegged to do it at Mania 22, and Edge was considered 2 years later. On top of this, Mark Henry and Randy Orton were both thought about for the role at various points, and so was the Ultimate Warrior before the big stupid twat got himself fired and then rehired prior to Mania 8. Losing to The Undertaker that night means Lesnar would have struggled to reach his zenith in 2014, and losing even earlier could have been disastrous for Taker's legacy. His career's incredible success is partly built on his WrestleMania streak, and losing it earlier would have sucked the life out of some of his career's biggest matches, including those Shawn Michaels classics. Taker would still be considered a WWE legend had the streak ended in, say, 2006, but would he be the monolith he is today? It's doubtful. Number 3. What if Daniel Bryan hadn't lost to Sheamus in 18 seconds? In the moment, Bryan losing to Sheamus in 18 seconds was embarrassing. It took the Irishman just a single bro kick to squash the World Heavyweight Champion at WrestleMania 28, starting the show off on a crushing note for Bryan's fanbase. It was an incomprehensibly quick mauling for one of the sport's cult heroes, and, it seemed, a devastating blow to his credibility. But this cloud had a silver lining. If it wasn't for this loss, there's a very real chance that Bryan's WWE career would have never really taken off in the way it did. Mania 28 angered his fans and galvanized their support. He was playing a whiny heel at the time, but nothing could stem his surge in popularity. And after his popular run as part of Team Hell No, the Yes movement was born. The audience was tired of Bryan's lack of focus, and they became too strong to be denied. Bryan was cruelly admitted from the 2014 Royal Rumble, but WWE parlayed his growing support into an angle, even going so far as to stage an in-ring fan protest on an episode of Raw. Daniel's career-making night followed at WrestleMania 30, but the Sheamus loss was the first domino to fall. Now, that's not to say Bryan wouldn't have eventually prospered without it, but it was definitely the catalyst to making Daniel one of WWE's most beloved performers, a status he still enjoys today. Number 2. What if Stone Cold hadn't turned heel in Houston? Steve Austin shaking hands with the devil at WrestleMania X7 had dire consequences. In doing so, Stone Cold partook in one of the most misguided turns ever. His iconic anti-hero character sold out to the corporate dollar, and he was never the same again, with his own decline mirroring a downturn that WWE has never ever truly recovered from. Austin's new heel performances were fine, but the problem was that nobody wanted to boo him. Attitude made him a folk hero, and the sight of him shaking hands with Vince McMahon was just too much. It would be a stretch to say the business would have never taken a downturn had Austin not gone heel, but keeping him babyface could have at least staved it off. Stone Cold would have been well positioned to lead WWE through the invasion had he not turned, and it would have allowed him to maintain his popularity all the way through to his eventual retirement in 2003. Now, Stone Cold did eventually turn face again, but he was never quite the same, and he struggled to stand out on WWE's new bloated roster after Vince McMahon had bought WCW and ECW. WWE wasted part of Austin's short prime with his turn and the immediate aftermath, and aside from his WrestleMania 19 match with The Rock, the time between 2001 and 2003 was a real blight on his career. And at number 1, what if WrestleMania 1 had flopped? The first WrestleMania was unlike anything we'd ever seen before. Vince McMahon was out to conquer the world, and this was his attempt at crossing into mainstream culture. It was WWE's first major event on this scale, and after recruiting an all-star lineup of famous wrestlers and celebrities, WrestleMania 1 changed the business forever. It's now an annual tradition, and it happened at the perfect time. Hulkamania was effectively launched at Mania 1, easing wrestling's transition into mainstream culture and raising the bar for major events around the globe. But Vince McMahon took a huge risk with WrestleMania, regarding the event as, and I quote, "the biggest gamble I have ever been involved with." McMahon poured most of his wealth into the event. If Mania hadn't worked, and WWE hadn't taken off afterwards, there's a good chance he would have gone out of business. Wrestling may never have gone national. WWE's stars would have scattered back to the territories. Wrestling may never have broken the mainstream, which means no Hulkamania, no Attitude, no Monday Night Wars, and no us standing here feeding you lists. The business would look incomprehensibly different, and would have struggled to ever transcend its original status as a niche form of entertainment. Now that's big. So that's our list, but can you think of any other what-if scenarios that would have changed the course of WrestleMania history? Be sure to let us know in the comment section below, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and once you've done that, give us a follow at WhatCulture WWE over on Twitter, and follow me at Andy H. Murray if you're into that kind of thing. But for now, I've been Andy, and I'll see you later.